Good morning. Welcome to week 12. This week we are starting the unit that deals with the period between World War I and World War II, and then we're going to go on into World War II. So we're basically covering the years 1919 to 1945. This is called an interwar period. So we're looking at the causes of World War II and different ways that groups and individuals and governments gained power during this particular time frame. So first of all, we want to take a look at what was happening in the world between the wars. And we're going to look at, we're going to divide kind of Europe and the United States just a little bit as well. We've already kind of talked about the Depression. So let's take a look at answering this essential question. Why did some nations turn to what are called totalitarian leaders? And totalitarian leaders are leaders who are basically dictators. But the difference between a dictator and a totalitarian leader is a dictator has seized power, and a totalitarian leader is often one that is elected to a position of leadership by the people. Now, they may not necessarily agree later at the amount of power that this leader gains once they take control. But in many cases, the countries in Europe were war torn, and they wanted a leader who said, I can make things better and I will lead this country back to what it was before. So we're going to look at some of those. So your first assignment is called Seeking Stability. And this is basically looking at what was going on and why and how these totalitarian leaders begin to rise. So you have a textbook link to read for that. And then you have some questions to answer for it as well. And then we're going to look at the Great Depression, because the Great Depression was worldwide. It wasn't just in the United States. And desperation will make people do things or let people accept things that they might not under ordinary circumstances accept. So this is going to open the door for these fascist leaders. And I'm using fascist because that is what you call a totalitarian leader. And we're going to take a look at some of those. So this is going to talk about this one is going to talk about the fascist leaders in Europe and in Asia. So when you open this one, you're going to look at 4 fascist leaders. Mussolini was in Italy, Stalin was in Russia, Franco was in Spain, and then Hitler, of course, is in Germany. Now, I've got an organizer for you to fill out. So when you click this organizer, it's going to ask you to make a copy of it. And then I've got a chart that I want you to fill out. And this chart will expand as you type in it. So I want you to practice using clear but short bullet points. Now, single words may not be your best answer. You need to show me that you understand these leaders, but I don't want long sentences. I want you to learn how to boil information down to the most critical pieces. So read through them, figure out what you think are the most critical facts for each leader. And one of those facts is going to be what location were they in. So that definitely needs to be one of your 3. Then you want to compare them. In what ways was Mussolini like, because that's the first one, at least one of these other leaders. And he might be like all 3 of these other leaders. So you really need to read all the information through one time and then go back and pick out this information. Then, what are some ways that Mussolini might have differed from these other people? Now, in this case, location is not a good thing to put here. So, saying, hey, Mussolini was different because he was in Italy and Stalin was in Russia. That's not really a difference that is significant. So fill this out. Again, it will expand as needed. All right. Now, after your fascist leaders, you're going to read a little bit about what's going on in Asia. And I'm not going to open that because it is just a reading. And then you're going to learn about the Emperor of Japan, Hirohito, because we're going to look at Pearl Harbor. And Hirohito is the emperor. He's going to be the emperor all the way up until the 1980s. He was not the military leader. Yamamoto is going to be the military leader during World War II. But I do want you to know a little bit about Hirohito. And then we're going to review the Treaty of Versailles just a little bit, because we're going to look at those terms that were in the Treaty of Versailles. And then we're going to take a look at what was Germany doing to gradually break those. Remember, Germany was angry because she was being punished for World War I. And gradually, under the leadership of Hitler, Hitler is very bold, and he starts gradually breaking small parts of the treaty and kind of watching to see what is the rest of the world going to do. And because of the Depression, the rest of the world really does not take any action. So he gets bolder and bolder and gradually breaks pretty much every part of the Treaty of Versailles. And by that time, it's going to take a world war to stop him. We're also going to look at what was Japan doing. Japan was on the move in Asia. Japan is very small territory-wise compared to China, but they had a very well-trained, very powerful army, and China is undergoing civil war and some threats from other countries, and they are kind of weak in spite of their size and their large army. So Japan decides it's going to take back an area of China called Manchuria. And it is very successful in doing that and gradually begins to move further and further into Japan. It's looking for resources, and that's an age-old sort of justification for moving into other places, and it needs resources. So it's also going to move towards the Philippines and the islands south of Japan. And that is going to be significant because that is where the Pacific theater of World War II is going to be fought, and it's going to be mainly the U.S. against Japan in those areas. So we're going to look at the early years of World War II, some of the first events that happened when Hitler moves into Poland, and then moves into other areas as well. You're going to look at Operation Barbarossa, which is going to pull the Russia into this war as well. And then we're going to look at what draws the United States into World War II, and that's primarily the attack on Pearl Harbor. And I'm sure you're probably already familiar with that, but we're going to take a look at that one. Roosevelt's reaction, of course, is to immediately ask Congress for a declaration of war. So I want you to look at his very famous Day of Infamy speech, which occurs less than 24 hours after the attack on Pearl Harbor, and then how the United States gets involved in World War II. And that will take us up to next week, where we will do a little bit more with World War II, and we're also going to look at the Holocaust next week. Have a great week.